Hey y'all, welcome to the Hey Dad, Can You Talk podcast. My name is Bailey Garner. I'm your host, and every other week we call my dad Toby, and we just have a real and raw and honest conversation about things that are going on in life, whether it's relationships, parenting, mental wellness. We talk about all of it, and we want to bring you along too because you're not alone in your struggles. Lots of times these things aren't talked about, and you might feel like you're the only one, but you're not. And so let's go ahead and do it. Let's call my dad.
What's up, B?
Hello, Father. How are you?
Oh, I'm just fine and dandy.
Good.
Fine and dandy on this fine, whatever day it is. Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day.
This will release on a Wednesday, so let's just pretend it's Wednesday. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. It's been a long week. I am a tired dude.
You are busy.
All good though.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm excited to talk to you because, I don't know about you, but I enjoy these conversations. So
Do I.
I know you look forward to talking to me.
Yes, I do. Every chance I get.
Well, okay. Last weekend, Grant and I went out of town, and some of our friends, we split them up and they helped keep our kids, which let's just talk about how important the power of community is. We could talk about that for a long time, but Gideon, my friend Beth Ann had to text me and say that Gideon was trying to kiss her daughter.
How old is her daughter?
6 and Gideon's 7.
Oh my.
Mm-hmm. Gideon claims he just wanted to hug her, but and
what Beth Ann tell him?
That we don't do that right now. And that if she wants a hug, she has to give him permission.
And so anyways, it begins.
Yeah. So that got she texted us about it. And she's obviously one of our good friends. So I trust her to have those conversations with our kids. But Grant and I were talking about how to handle it. And I was telling him it just brings up all these thoughts of being terrified of when they get older. And I can't control what they're, I can't control today either what he's doing. But what happens if he does make a mistake, and it reflects on us is what it feels like. And I know we talk about this a lot, but I've talked with a few friends recently about situations where they have felt like disappointed in their child, or they have felt like they did something wrong, which I know you and I hear this a lot whenever we're traveling and when you're speaking. But so I wanted to talk to you today about the feelings of disappointment when your kids are making choices that you don't want them to make. And I want to especially talk about older kids because I think I'm not there yet, but when they get older and they're being formed into adults and you're really having to let them make these choices and have the consequences, but at the same time, you want to help them. I can only imagine the tug and pull of feeling both things. Do you recall a time when Ross and I were growing up that we were making poor choices, and what did you do?
Oh, yes. I recall several times that you guys were making poor choices, You
mean we weren't perfect?
I don't think so. Maybe. Maybe.
Maybe
close.
Ross.
But yeah, I do. I remember you guys making poor choices, and I remember being disappointed because you are disappointed when your kids choose things that aren't the best for them or for those around them. That's called being human, I think, right? Mm-hmm. The question isn't, what do you do if your kids make poor choices? The question is, what are you going to do when your child makes poor choices? Mm-hmm. They're human beings and they're going to make mistakes. And, my theory was always that I think the Bible is clear that the greatest shaper of your character is pain. That's what God uses. He uses pain. And And so when we allow our kids to feel the pain of some of their poor choices and don't rescue them from some of those consequences, I think it's one of the most God-loving representations of how God treats us that's out there. And that's hard. That's the hard part for me is, you know, you love your kids. You don't want them to experience pain, but honestly, it's the only way they learn. And you have to kind of swallow your feelings, as we like to say. You know, you have to feel your feelings, but they can't be the steering wheel of your life. And you can't operate out of your disappointment. You know, those are some initial thoughts I have. The hard part of it is, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The hard part is you do not want to build like a performance mentality in your child. And so you always, and I tried to do this. I mean, I'm sure like most parents, I didn't get it right all the time, but I always try to separate what you did from who you are. You always want to speak identity in life, even in midst of choices that aren't acceptable. You know, it's like, hey, Bailey, like you choosing to do that isn't okay. And here's going to be the consequences because you chose that. But I want you to know it doesn't make me love you any less or think that you're not who God says that you are. However, whatever wording you would use to say that to your child, I think you always have to be really aware of it.
Yeah. Did you ever worry about how other of your friends were perceiving us?
No, I really didn't. That just wasn't my thing. But again, I'm in full-time local church ministry, and you live in a glass house. And so I kind of had us against the world in that thing. And your mom struggled with that more than I did because people seem to take great pleasure in pointing out your child's shortcomings. And the fact of the matter is you're going to know a lot of other kids' shortcomings too. And so I don't want to go wrestle a pig in the mud because all that's going to happen at the end is I'm going to smell like a pig and be muddy. And so there's no reason to like get in a tit for tat with another parent. When those kind of things happen, it's just, you gotta, manage the orbit of your world and let everyone else take care of theirs.
Yeah. One thing I hope to do is I want to be a place where our kids want to tell us when they've made mistakes and not be scared to tell us, and I don't think I don't really know how to cultivate that specific relation. Like I feel like we are a safe place, but at the same time, it's like, how do you hold them accountable and give them expectations, but also be like, but it's okay to tell me. I'd rather you come to me first when you've made a mistake.
Well, again, age appropriate, right? But part of it is even at the age of young kids, you want to, I like to call it, you want to cultivate a culture of vulnerability, which means I want to be honest and open about my mistakes. I want to be quick to say I'm sorry to my kids. I want my kids to see me apologizing to my wife. Why? Because I want them, if there's this vulnerability, authenticity, if I'm creating that culture, then that's going to be the first place they come. That's one side. The other side is, quite honestly, and I'm sure there's some who don't agree with this, but it's like, it kind of begins with, hey man, if I hear it from you, like the consequence is not going to be as large as if I hear it from somebody else. Like it's better for you. And I think as kids are formed and as they're growing, there's a part of that has to happen, right? There's a part of it that it has to be, I'm going to show you in a language you understand why you need to talk to me about it before I hear about it somewhere else. And that was my dad's deal. My dad's deal was, hey man, if you get in trouble at school today, if the principal calls me before you tell me, which I did a lot, it's going to be worse.
Mm-hmm.
And what he was trying to teach me was, hey, man, I need to be the first place you come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think another thing, and this might not relate to everyone if they're listening and they're not a believer, but I want to instill biblical values, when we're teaching our kids things, but I don't want God to feel like this rule hammer, how you say you're always being scared of God coming down with the hammer on you when you make mistakes or whatever, and I have found recently, like, especially Micah, he's 5 and he asks a lot of why questions, and like why we don't do things. And I have a hard time because I don't want to be like, well, just because God says this is how we have to do it. And then it feels like, I don't know. How do you have any advice on that? Like how to instill that we do these because these are principles that we want to follow from his word, but not make it like a strict, like a rule book. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So why do you want to follow God's principles? That'd be a question I'd ask you.
Because I want to be in his will and I want to go to heaven.
Well, we'll have it off.
Look at you. No, have a conversation right now.
Well,
I mean,
what you're saying
I also
is
I also am sweating because I wasn't prepared for you to ask
you
me
brought
questions.
this up, but you're basically saying, hey, I want to perform well, so God will let me go to heaven, which is not the gospel.
And that's something I struggle with in general that I have to talk to myself about.
That's not the gospel, right? You don't, one person performed, and because that one person performed, you will be in heaven. It's Jesus.
Right.
But the thing is, I mean, God's principles are not rules. God's principles are, this is a better way to live your life. This is how I designed you to live, right? Like I designed you to be generous. And when you're selfish, it's going to shrink your heart. That's much different than, because God says we're supposed to give.
Right.
It's not the same thing. I mean, you may end up at the same place, but I'm not generous because God says you got to give. And if you don't give, I'm going to punish you. I'm generous because the one who created me says, look, the way I wired you up, your life is it's going to be more full, more rich. You're going to have more peace, more joy if you live an open-handed life. Right. And that's what I think you cultivate in your kids is, hey, man, we have a father that loves us and wants what's best for us. And because he knows more than we do because he created us. And he created us in a way that this is what we're going to do. And this is not what we're not going to do, not because we're scared of him, but because we think he loves us so much that he shows us in his word better ways to live than we might find in other places. And so when we have to choose, we're going to choose his way. And you reiterate the point that, man, we're not doing this to be good. We're made good because of Jesus. We're doing this because of how much he loved us to give us Jesus, not so that we can get something that Jesus already gave us. I think, and again, that's an atmosphere that you cultivate in your home with a 5-year-old, which is, why can't we do this? Everybody else does that. Well, because we've decided to base our life upon what God says is the healthiest way for us to live. And we trust him. And because he's been so good to us in every other way, we're going to do what we can to live in a way that he says we were designed to live because we think he knows what's best for us.
That's good. Need to read that myself.
And by the way, if you're listening to this and not watching it, God. Bailey is sweaty. She's sweating right now, which is very interesting to me.
No, it's just funny because I still have to fight that in my mind. Like, I mean, it comes down to even with having my quiet time, and spending time in the word. Like I struggle with, okay, I'm going to do this because I know, like I'm supposed to, versus because that's just being honest, especially in the season that I'm in where it's loud all the time and not a lot of alone time, And so I think that's a constant thing and I'm like, I'm wired as a performer. So it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to separate that because I've always just wanted to follow the rules and do what's told of me. And so to separate that from the relationship with God too, it takes an intentional effort of changing the way I think.
Well, and I mean, look, this is like anybody who's listening to this conversation, step back for a minute. And this is proof, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I'm saying that what I tried to do was my best to instill in you a non-performance mentality when it comes to God and why we follow his principles. And it's still hard for you, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it's like you
didn't do something wrong.
That's my point. It's called life. And I'm only one voice that shapes you.
Right.
And because of how God uniquely creates us, we are more vulnerable to some things than others. You know, your husband does not have a performance mentality. He's a black and white guy. He has other issues he's vulnerable to that you're not. Well, that's true about your kids. And like I was teaching about this at Cross Timbers, my home church. And I took this big jar that had a spigot and I was filling it up, talking about abundant life and about that the capacity of that jug, that jar represents the emotional energy we have. Mm-hmm. You know, an abundant life is overflowing emotional energy. Mm-hmm. That's the end result of that, right? Is love, joy, peace, faith. All of those things come out of the abundance of an overflowing energy. And when you have to think about how you're spending your energy. And if I'm spending my energy always concerned about what somebody else thinks, always concerned if I'm doing it right, that's energy I do not have to use, A, to pour into my kid, and B, it's sucking out the very energy that Jesus is trying to pour in to give me an overflowing life. And so, man, but I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying it's a battle worth fighting. I fight it. I mean, it's easy to talk about, you know, in a conversation with you, but I think when you just recognize your tendencies and you're very self-aware that that's the direction you go, it's just, man, life is a series of mid-course corrections, self-corrections along the way. And I think we beat ourselves up for feeling a certain way instead of just recognizing that's how we're feeling and correcting back to center. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's a better use of our energy.
Yeah, you talk a lot about like lights on our dashboard. And I feel like for me and my personality, if I'm like what you said, overanalyzing what people have said to me or what I think they're thinking about me or whatever, that's usually like a little light that's like, hey, you're not either spending intentional time to be filled up by his words, or you're putting too much clout into what humans are saying about you versus what God says about you. And so how do I replace those two and make sure, so I think that I have learned it's like this obviously with our, in our life, but I have learned, up and down. Sorry. Some people aren't watching, but I have learned that if I'm feeling one way, that's probably that's a warning sign. I need to analyze it.
Right. And the older you get, the more it becomes, it's not simply a recognition of the trigger or the reaction, pick your word. Mm-hmm. For a guy who hates the word trigger, I sure have used it a lot lately, but you go beyond that to, okay, holistically speaking, I'm a mind, I'm a body, I'm a spirit, right? I'm all those three make who I am. And so we move beyond what am I doing to why am I doing what I'm doing? Like for me, first 2 days of this week, I was on an 8:30 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon Zoom call with 40 churches working. I'm mentoring some young pastors and we're working through some strategic stuff, which strategic stuff sucks the energy out of me. If it's relational, I'm in. If it's strategic, it's just a grind. And I did it for 2 days. And the second day we got through and my head hurt. I was tired. I hadn't gotten a lot of rest. I had some people that worked for me who had several requests that were coming in and I was hungry. And your mom there was a part of what she was making for dinner. I was doing part, she was doing part that didn't come out right. And I was angry.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say anything, but like I had anger coming up in me. I really wanted to say, really? Which is dumb. But it was because I was tired. It was because, and instead of going, well, you're a pitiful person for being angry. If you were a better Christian, you wouldn't be angry. I just recognized that's what it was and did what for me is the most hard. It's difficult, but best thing I can do, which I just didn't say anything because I recognized it wasn't about her. It was about me. So we go beyond like what we're doing to get down to where am I depleted in a place that's causing me to go there? That's a very simple answer. But I think we have to be self-aware enough and God-aware enough of how we were created so that we can recognize that before we do damage to ourselves or to somebody else.
Yeah, that's good. I think that can apply to so many with us and with our kids. Because a lot of times, for me, I know at least I realized later that they were acting a certain way because of an underlying issue that maybe I didn't take the time to figure out. And I'm trying to do a better job of that.
Yeah. And sometimes you can't do that. And it's okay. And but you'll never be able to do that if you're not doing that for yourself.
True. Yeah.
You'll never be in a healthy enough spot to do it.
And want an example to share with your kids, like, hey, I yelled at you because I'm tired and I had a hard day. So I'm sorry, and doesn't excuse what I did, but just so you know, sometimes you might make mistakes because you're not taking care of yourself or you didn't get rest or whatever. So.
Yeah. But one of the things that like your mom and I had some conflict about in raising you two was, especially when you were younger, the answer to some way you guys were responding was, well, they're just tired.
Yeah.
And I would say, okay, so I want to teach these kids how to respond when you're tired, not let being tired be the excuse for what's the behavior. Right?
Yeah.
And so there's a fine line there too. That's for another. Yeah. Let's do a whole episode, a whole call just about, hey, talk about the 5 biggest conflicts you and mom had raising us.
Let's do that.
You might want to get mom on for some airtime, but most of them, honestly, a couple of them would surprise you probably. And we'll see if I'll be that vulnerable to talk about them on here. But
well, mom always says she doesn't remember that you remember.
Yes, she does. So, and I think sometimes that's true. And sometimes she just would rather not remember.
That makes sense. Yeah. Well, thanks for your wisdom today.
It's always lots of fun. I don't know if I have any, but wisdom is just dumb tax, right? It's not intelligence. It's not smarts. Wisdom is, hey, I did that. That didn't go well. That hurt. Don't do that because I don't want you to hurt. That's all wisdom is.
Yeah, but I think this is awesome that we get to have these conversations because a lot of people wish they could call their dad and they can't. So I'm thankful I have you to talk to, but also that other people can listen in and have you as their quote dad to listen to. So thank you.
I do too. And I think it's always important, man, like you understand because you're my kid. You'll always be my kid, but that, I have a lot of passion about some of these things we talk about. And it's mostly born out of the mistakes I made. I sure don't think I know it all. I sure don't. I'm passionate about this truth because it took me too long to figure it out. And so if I can help you figure it out before I did, then I'm doing my job as your dad.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of fun for me.
It is fun. I like it.
But I would just say if I were to say one thing to moms that are listening today, I would say this: conserve your energy for the right things. Recognize where you are burning energy, worrying about something you can't control, and ask God to help you focus your life in a place where you are expending energy that it gets leverage for the good of your kids and the kingdom.
That's good.
That would be a great exercise.
Yeah, I like that. Well, thanks, Dad. I love
Thank
you.
Baby. Love you too, baby. Hope you all have a great day.
You too. Love you.
Love you.
Dad, tell us what GOBY coaching is.
I spend so much of my time talking to large groups of people about these principles to connect your kids to God's power when they're battling for their mental wellness. But it's like an off the rack thing, right? I don't know everybody's individual situation. And I'm sorry, I've had so many connect with us, as you know, saying, hey man, could I just talk to you for a little while about it? That GOBY coaching really has been a dream where we could personalize some of this teaching. And so not just give you the principle, but walk you through in a personal one-on-one way how to implement some of these principles and how to adjust along the way when it's not going, because we all know parenting is not an exact science. And just for you to have some personal encouragement. So it's a 3-month program. It's a paid program for 3 months where I'm only taking 10, and it's exciting. It's fun to talk to mom and dads on a weekly basis, one-on-one, about the challenges they're facing, the feelings they're having, and how they can make some progress in this area of helping their kids become everything God created them to be.
So like a private podcast of their own, but not recorded.
Yeah, you could call it that. It's kind of like you and me here, except for it's just between me and them.
Yep. So I'll put a link in the show notes, but where do they get plugged in outside of our social media accounts for GOBY
Well,
coaching?
I mean, the link is the best place, but you can also go to beagoby.com and there's information there about GOBY coaching. You can find out all about the program.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Dad. I think this is an awesome opportunity for people. So I'm excited.
Too. Lots of fun. Thanks, B.
You're welcome. Bye. Thanks, y'all, for listening to another episode of our Hey Dad podcast. I just love our little community we've got here. I've been trying to share at the end of every episode a table topic that you could talk about, because that is one way that we could be intentional with our families. And I've been trying to do this with my kids and my family. As you know, dinner time can be kind of crazy, but so give yourself some grace on this. But one of the topics or the questions that I'm going to ask my family this week that I encourage you to ask your family is, what do you like best about being in this family? I feel like that would be a great conversation starter. Another thing that you can ask is, what is something you do that makes yourself proud? So I challenge you to ask your family those questions and just have some intentional conversations surrounding your dinner table. We love y'all. We're so happy that you're here. Please make sure you're connecting with us on our socials, and also that you are sharing this podcast with a friend. And lastly, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Dad, you can email me, Bailey@beagoby.com, BEAGOBY.com, and you can submit your questions and I'll ask Dad for you so that you can get your questions answered as well. Hope y'all are having a great week. We'll see you in 2 weeks.